doing the same thing they kind of been doing since 2010, getting those 3 4-star guys occasionally. Really not getting those big 5-star guys, although they do have one. Well, I guess Tremonda Moore, he's from 4 or 5-star, depending on where you're looking at. He's kind of being, he told a site earlier this week, a couple weeks ago, it was really between OU, Bama, and OSU, and he listed OU as his favorite. From what I know, he was here during the official visit weekend this past weekend. It didn't, from a certain perspective, it didn't look as if he was too enthusiastic about being in Stillwater, I guess what you could say. Um, I'm thinking he's probably going to lean more towards the OU whenever he ends up choosing those 2 teams. Right now, OSU, they need a quarterback. Sure, they have Mason Rudolph right now, but they don't really need to be in that situation like they were a few years ago whenever it was Chelf, Walsh, Chelf, Walsh. They need a guy for the future to kind of breed. That way they do know. Right now, they do have a preferred walk-on committed, and Nick Burns out of Berry Hill High School in Tulsa area, but he's also getting some phone calls, from not the big Division One schools, but UNT, UTSA, some Colorado schools. So I mean, OSU really has got to step it up because this guy he wants to be at OSU, but right now he's getting offers to actually get school paid for. I do know that they got during the recruiting weekend. They did get help where they needed it. Shane Richards, a JUCO transfer, he's a 3-star, 6'6", 325 guy. He did tell them that he's going to commit, but he does want to go on his official visit still. So it's kind of one of those, 75% type things. Like, we think he's going to be here, but it's still out there. They really went out and got what they needed. They got some offensive tackle talent, some big offensive tackle, big offensive lineman, because that offensive line was horrid. What they're still missing is the running back, because even with a bad offensive line, you still need a running back who kind of can make something out of nothing. And right now, it kind of seems like OSU's really trying to get Barry J. Sanders back. Not sure how that would work out. Not sure how he would fit into the scheme, but definitely would be something interesting to look at if he ended up coming to Stillwater.
And Gerald, to listen to you, I wouldn't think that you just came off 10 wins. Bad offensive line, we don't have a running back, we need a quarterback, and it's difficult for me to believe that with 25 to 30 commits that there's not a quarterback at this point, the way things are shaking out, that's going to come on campus to a program that's known for throwing the football, and I know that just about everybody's known for throwing the football now, but even going back several years, known for throwing the football, and with a head coach who is used to developing quarterbacks, that should be in a better position than it currently rests.
Yeah, well, they do have a guy in Keandre Woodchee, 3-star, and he was committed to Louisiana Tech a few weeks ago whenever the Nick Starkel thing kind of just blew up. He decommitted out of nowhere. Well, essentially,
is there any more word on that?
From what I know,
on the Starkel?
Yeah, I don't know about him committing anywhere. I haven't followed him since then, but from what I know,
it seems like A&M.
Yeah, that's what it's A&M USC. But from what I know, OSU kind of stepped back from him after his junior year was really good. His senior year was kind of just it was worse, and they were like, well, maybe we can find someone better. And I think they kind of just stepped off of him a little bit, stepped off the pedal. He kind of lost interest, and now they looked him at this Woodchee guy, who I do know he decommitted from Louisiana Tech, and supposedly he's seriously considering Oklahoma State. So I would say out of the quarterbacks that OSU has offered on scholarship, he's probably the most likely to end up on campus next year. But, I mean, it's not something they need to worry. I think they need to bring one in. You never don't want to have a quarterback in a class, in my opinion, because you never know when it's going to happen. I mean, we saw it with OSU in 2014. Walsh goes down. They had to use Garmin because they didn't want to redshirt Rudolph. I mean, Garmin wasn't a guy you wanted leading your team. And right now, none of the guys other than Rudolph really have any kind of experience in game. So you kind of want those options. I think Woodchee would probably be a solid option to bring in. But, yeah, you're right, Mark. Coming off a 10-win season, a Sugar Bowl berth, you hear a lot more optimism. But this team did really, the coaches should get credit for it because they did a lot with only really a pass rush and a pass game. The secondary could be flaccid at times. The rushing was non-existent. I mean, did a lot of things with nothing.
Okay, we think about recruiting, and you look at Florida, California, and Texas, and there appears to be no end to the amount of talent there. But when you look at Texas, obviously everybody's headed toward Texas, and the Big 12 especially is rooted in Texas, TCU, Baylor, Texas, of course, and Texas Tech, and Oklahoma gets most of its talent from the Lone Star State as well. Just your thoughts about Oklahoma State trying to compete with all of those Big 12 schools, plus, of course, Texas A&M, LSU. Man, Texas is just, again, loaded with talent, but the amount of big-time schools digging into Texas makes it difficult.
Yeah, I did a article for the site about 2 weeks ago, I think, and I looked at the top 50 recruits in Texas for this recruiting class. 9 of them are not committed right now, uncommitted. The rest of them going to like I think there's 13 or something like that going to the Big 12, 12 SEC, 13 Pac-12s, numbers like that, and it's just you're looking at it. I mean, Oregon State as a player committed in the top 50 right now in the state of Texas. Oklahoma State has 0. Texas Tech has some, Baylor has some, OU, and I mean those are going to get them with them being in-house really, in-house production. It seems like OSU's wasting all this, like not wasting, but they're going after these big guys, these 4-star, 5-star guys, and they're not getting them because Alabama, Ole Miss, Florida, OU, Texas, all these guys are coming in and raiding the state. I mean, I'm not saying they're like just completely abandoned recruiting in Texas, but maybe taking 5% of your efforts from Texas, putting it in another state. I mean, Ohio gets guys all the time. You got guys in Ohio. I mean, yeah, you still got to battle with Ohio State and Michigan's and stuff like that. But I mean, you're doing the same thing you're doing in Texas right now.
You bring up a great point because I had this similar discussion concerning Nebraska football, which is expected by the homers in Nebraska to be an elite program, but I think that day's gone by. Oklahoma State is, I would think most Oklahoma State fans are expecting a top 25 program year in, year out, and maybe catch lightning in a bottle every 5 years and compete heavily for a college football playoff berth. But if you go for the 5 stars and you lose, then you're missing out all these quality 3 and 4, low 4 stars. And so it's a strategy that you got to take. Are we going to go for the gusto, go for the gold, and miss out on most of them, and maybe we grab a couple gems? Or do we have a really solid class because we're in it against Pac-12 and SEC and Big Ten schools that are in that second level, the throw your hat in there, Arizona State, Arizona's across the board, Mississippi State's, those type of schools, and we might have a little bit more success. That's the decision to be made by the coaching staff and, of course, Mike Gundy.
No, absolutely. And, I mean, I think what kind of got me thinking about this was watching the OSU Ole Miss game and realizing that there is a huge difference in the 3, 4-star guys OSU brings in. Yeah, they play well for OSU, and they look like they're football players. But then you look at Ole Miss, and they got guys like just mountaining over them. I mean, it's national championship game, for example. Alabama was able to plug and play 5-star recruits all day. OSU had an Ogba. They didn't have a guy behind him that could play like him. So it's just kind of like they're getting these solid guys, but then they really don't have anybody behind them to kind of breed in and put them in case anything happens. They don't have the depth.